Hi everyone and welcome to episode 10 of Lockdown Dads. My name's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm a coach, I'm a father of two children. I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son.
And I'm James Miller, author of Dads Don't Babysit, editor of workingdads.co.uk, and father to two other children, different children to Ian's, who are 12 and 9. Well, they would be if they're different ages, wouldn't they? Yes, and I'm looking down the camera this week. This is an exciting new angle, isn't it? Looking down on you all.
I know. Mine's much the same. I've changed my t-shirt. I realised I was looking back at some of the footage, and I realised I have a particular polo shirt. I'm a big polo shirt wearer, and I realised I have particular polo shirts were making an appearance. So this is a new t-shirt actually. It's a bit of it's got a sort of barbed wire kind of desert feel to it. But yeah, it's a different one because I was conscious that
we discussed wearing shirts and looking professional before, but also I'm too fat for t-shirts. Can't wear t-shirts anymore.
Can't wear.
I've decided. Got to that point in sort of early 40s and just decided, no. I mean, very rarely can I.
I'm now going to look at myself in a different way, going, "Am I too fat for this t-shirt?" I just bought a new one actually, so I just did some online shopping.
There's a clear answer to that, but I used to imagine wearing my cool band t-shirts that I bought in the 90s when I was in my 40s, and then sort of put them on and realised, no, you just look like a sad, fat, middle-aged man walking around with Radiohead on your belly. Not a good look.
And
there you go. There's my tip. There's my tip earlier this week.
Tip.
Don't wear band t-shirts. You're a fat middle-aged man. It doesn't look cool.
Yeah.
Even though it does.
Especially not with leather, I guess. The leather jacket combo, maybe, or.
Yeah, I haven't got any of that. Take this too far. Anyway, yes, let's start with the usual question. We haven't got a guest this week because this is episode 10. So it seems like a good time to catch up and see what's been happening in the last few months. Well, lots has been happening. But in the last 7 days, it's time for the usual question. Ian, how are you?
Mixed, not quite as sort of bouncy and happy as I think I was last week, James, which will be one of my sort of tips later on. I found a lot of the days are kind of molded into one a little bit, and I found hard to separate out one thing for another. So I've been kind of trying to work quite hard in terms of making separation in the day for one thing at a time and try not to do too many different things and dip into school stuff and then dip into work stuff. So that's been a little bit tricky. But the haircut, I mean, by the time this comes out, we'll only be 1 day away from the father and son haircut. So that's exciting. The other thing, the cats don't know this yet, but they're going into the vet, which they're for their annual checkup, which means that if we were to choose to go away on holiday at some stage in the summer, they will have had their vaccinations and jabs, so then they can go into the cattery, which I know is now open. So that's just part of this kind of process of, I guess, getting ready to do things and go to places and thinking about where we can go and whether we can stay over, because we tend not to get people in to look after them, so they need to have their jabs. So that's booked in. That's also on Tuesday, so it's a double whammy. But I guess one of the things that we wrestled with was when we were going to ask our cleaner to come back. We've had different cleaners for best part of 10 years since we've moved into this house, and I think when Freya was first born, I guess. And we've been paying our cleaner because I thought that was an important thing to do. And from next Thursday, she'll be back. So Thursday yesterday, I did my last. For a while, I say my last. I've temporarily furloughed myself from the cleaning role, which I didn't really enjoy that much. It just seemed to take a long time, and I'm not sure I got any better. But yeah, that was a decision we kind of thought about, having someone into the house on a sort of regular basis, and we've kind of decided to go for it, really. So yeah, that's interesting times.
There's a lot of normality there. That is very much a lot of cleaners, vets, going places, having people in, a lot of normality. How's that feeling going back to normality? Because certainly one of the things I found, and not yet, things are different now because there's a lot more normality sort of flooding in, but certainly previously when little bits of normality have landed into the weird lockdown experience, it's actually been quite difficult to deal with. I mean, I've talked before about going to the coffee shop and then going, hang on, this is not like we used to go to the coffee shop, and actually this is just a reminder of normal life that we don't have anymore. How does it feel with normality sort of flooding back?
I think different. I think it's a sign of something positive, but it's still a little bit best one in the world. It still almost feels a little bit anxious about it in a way. Is that
Yeah.
you want it to be normal, but you kind of, and you know that it's that coronavirus is not sort of rampant in the community, certainly where we are at the moment. It doesn't seem to be anywhere near in the way it was 100 days ago. So you logically that, but also there's that sense of actually, well, our cleaner, Leanna, she's going to be using public transport, so she'll have a mask on, but she'll also be probably going into other people's homes. Is there anything we need to do differently? It's kind of normal, but it's not normal. My son's back to school 2 days next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and then my daughter 2 days the week after. So again, normal, but not. I guess just a little bit of anxiety and just sort of baby steps, really. And actually, we kind of discussed whether we were ready for it. Lisa and I have discussed it over the last sort of 3 weeks or so, is that when we wanted to ask our cleaner to come back, and kind of put it off. And I sort of thought, I'm kind of ready. It's policy-wise, things have changed in terms of what you're allowed to do. So for some people, they've changed already. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, for you, James, and what's you're doing sort of more normal things today in particular. I mean, how do you feel? I know you're going on a shopping trip. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's been a funny week, this one, because as you say, I think it's been on one level it felt quite hard, because last week we got to sort of we broke the back of the school term, and it felt like, okay, we're over halfway. This week school holiday still feels a way off. We've still got a couple of weeks. I think next week then we're really into the final straight through to the school holidays. I think the kids will begin to ease up, and that'll be nice. But yeah, as you say, there's been a lot going on this week. I found. I mean, my son didn't feel well on Monday, so that sort of was a slightly weird day, and then he was fine. That again would be a totally normal thing in normal life, but it's like, oh, what's going on here, and what do we do about it? Do we let him sit in front of the telly all day when that's what he's doing a lot of anyway for the last 3 months? And yes, going shopping today. My daughter's, she was supposed to have an inset day at school, so we sort of managed to work it such that she is getting a day away from her desk, and she, of course, wants to go to TK Maxx, where all basically teen and pre-teen girls like to spend all their time, it seems. I don't really know why, because TK Maxx, it's all right, TK Maxx, but yeah, and the big thing for me, which will lead us on to when I'm 64, actually, is that I am back at work. I'm off of furlough. Very notice, but that seems to be, that's how these things work, and that's not a criticism. But yeah, so as of 1st July, I'm back editing Working Dads. Actually, I'm not just the editor of workingdads.co.uk. I'm actually editing workingdads.co.uk, as opposed to the 3 months where I was editor who didn't edit. So that's been really interesting, and I think that is sort of what I wanted to think about in the when I'm 64. Obviously, not music. Maybe one day we'll hum it or something. Because coming back to the role, obviously we've been doing this. There's us and there's certain others, some of whom have been guests on this podcast already, who do the rounds of various Zoom seminars and all the rest of it. In fact, some of us are doing another one next Friday, of course, at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've been thinking about and talking about what lockdown means for dads. But now I'm having to think about what it means for my role as editor of workingdads.co.uk. So what's changed for men in that time? I think, and how do we lead the conversation from here on? Because the answer to those two questions is one, I think, and I very much want to hear your views on this. I think it's possibly harder for men coming out of this to ask for flexible working and stuff because of the economy. Because particularly there's a lot of jobs going, and a lot of those jobs are typically and unfortunately jobs that women do, so there may be more pressure on men to keep earning, and so then it's harder for them to make demands. The market is skewed towards the employers. And in terms of how we lead the argument, I haven't got an answer to that one, but I do think it's really important that you and I and our allies are out there making the case. And I'm not quite sure what the case is. That's the problem. But we need to be making the case now more than ever, because I think it would be very easy to let it slide. Is that your feeling?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that sense of fear, and in the sort of pre-pandemic times, then men often felt a sense of discomfort, personal discomfort, in asking for something that they were concerned that might demonstrate that they weren't all in and fully committed to work, because most workplaces sort of rewards people who are or appear to be fully committed to their role and to their job. And sometimes asking for remote working or flexible working seems very much out of step with that. And now the fear, whereas now we're in a situation where many businesses have affected, and huge numbers of people have demonstrated that it is entirely possible to produce the outputs. There is, there are challenges around mental health. There's challenges around division between where the lines are drawn between work and home, and kids are at home in a way that you wouldn't design it in this way. But that fear has now been replaced by that sort of pure economic factor, which we do have to recognise, is that it is really at the end of the day, you need to be earning, as a family, you need to be earning money to be able to have a roof over your head and provide for sort of, at the very least, the basic needs that your family have. So I think it's a really difficult one. I think men need to look out for the allies. They need to look out for the allies amongst themselves, and sort of say, especially working dads, and say, actually, it's possible. I am committed, but I do need to have some time, at home. I think school holidays is the thing that's looming on the horizon. So I mean, 6 weeks of school holidays, 6 weeks is nothing. We're used to kind of this, in a sense, we've coped with longer periods of time. But I know there's almost no sort of provision for children to do other things, and sometimes that might be quite good. I don't know how you feel about it, James. I'm not sure whether school holidays is actually good for working parents or not, whether supervising homeschool arrangements was actually taking you away from work, or actually will it be easier to work now that you don't have to keep an eye on what the teacher's been setting remotely? I don't know. It's a strange one.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on one thing before I answer that, is that you mentioned about being all in, which I think is a really interesting idea, because I think for a lot of men, being all in involves being the earner, when actually being all in can also involve being around for your kids and being engaged and being present. It doesn't just mean putting the food on the table, although clearly that's important, but that doesn't have to fall just on you as the dad. That's on on everyone to some extent. But yeah, I think school holidays. I think a lot of school holidays is I think it's one of those that's going to depend on the children to a lot of extent. I mean, a bit like the last 3 months, it depends on who your kids are, and if they will sit and do the schoolwork, then that has made the last 3 months a lot easier than if your kids have no interest in doing schoolwork at all. But yeah, I think well, basically, from what I'm picking up from people I know that live in Scotland, where obviously they've been on holiday now for a week or so, it's horrible because there's nothing to do and the kids are really bored. So that's the only inkling that I've had of what's coming down the track. I've been slightly dreading it because, my kids generally will sit down and do their schoolwork. And if they haven't got that, then it's going to fall on somebody to entertain them, and it's going to be probably me. So that's going to be interesting. But the good thing is, you say places are opening up, so that's going to be helpful from a practical point of view.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You talk about this, the dad's agenda, whatever you want to call it, and how it is not just an economic thing. And I think that is the argument that we need to be making now. And I think that's going to be the hardest part of the argument, because it could be, it doesn't have to be. I mean, I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago about human capital, and to be honest, I was ripping off a seminar that I've been listening to about economics, stealing people who are far more clever than me, stealing their ideas. But this idea that furlough and everything the government has done in the last 3 months to support jobs recognizes that it's more than just economics; it's about people.
Yeah.
And hopefully they will continue that going forward. I'm not seeing a lot of sign they will. We've got a
Yeah.
summer budget statement coming up in the next couple
Mm.
of weeks, so that might give us an inkling of where the government's going on that sort of stuff. But I think that is the argument that we need to make, is that it's about human capital. It's not just about, we're not just economic
Yeah.
blocks. We are people who have children at home who need entertaining or schooling or whatever. Because I think a lot of companies will be interested in working from home going forward in case of the next pandemic or the next spike or whatever.
Yeah.
But we need to make the case to them that they need to be ready, because they need to continue with working from home, because it's good for their employees, good for their business. And it is, and we know it is. You and I know that it is. That the companies who do this will be the companies who thrive in the difficult economic circumstances we're going into, if we're going into them, of course.
Yeah, it's the economics bits it does trouble me a bit, in the sense that I kind of wonder what I can do to support. I do wonder what can I do to support and sort of support the economy. There are relatively limited opportunities to do things. I mean, by the time this goes out, then pubs will have had their first weekend of opening, pubs and restaurants, whatever that might look like. Now, I don't know about you, James. I haven't been a big pub goer for a number of years, so my Saturday night entertainment rarely involves going to the pub. It involves a lot of planning, and it involves getting a babysitter in, and it involves a nice restaurant and dipping into it. I haven't really, to be honest, I haven't really thought about it. The other bit that I, on a day-to-day basis that I drive the economy, is drop the kids off at school and head to a coffee shop and buy 2 or 3 coffees and maybe a cake, or depending on whether I've got the enthusiasm, a little bit of sandwich for lunch, and that's, in a way, that's a little bit of my contribution to sort of local economics, I guess. But again, that's not really practical at the moment either. So it does worry me a little bit as to individually, and you see a lot of job losses at the moment in certainly in terms of casual dining sector, and anything related to tourism and shops opening, anything where you have to go somewhere. I mean, casual dining suffered for 4 or 5 years, if we're being honest. It's probably, there was a glut of supply. But I don't know how. I mean, what are your thoughts about how do we go about, if we've got the opportunity, how do we go about helping to make it easier for other people in society?
Well, that's the when I'm 44, isn't it? In 6 months, 18 months, what is the high street going to look like, and how is that going to affect us as working parents? Because, as you say, I mean, yeah, absolutely, I would go and sit in the cafe and do some work. And to be honest, I would work better in the cafe, and not because I was in a cafe, I think, but because I walked to the cafe. I mean, there's a tip. That's possibly for another day, another environment. But when you could go out, the walk would get your brain working, and you sit in the cafe with a coffee and then bang out a story.
Well, it was the first time we met, wasn't it? We we met met near your house, and I drove.
Wasn't it?
That's right.
Which is not open until the 31st of July. So yeah, who knows? Okay. I mean, I don't know. I have tentative plans to go to the pub tomorrow.
Oh,
I wouldn't usually go to the pub on a Saturday night, as you say, but mainly as a sort of, to be honest, it's mainly as a sort of journalistic thing. I'm intrigued as to see what it's going to look like and what it's going to be like. But it'll be nice to get a pint if I can. But I don't know if I'm going to, because I haven't done my research yet. So I will report back next week, because it's not just going to the pub, is it? That's the thing. I mean, there's talk of having to book a table. Some of the pubs around our way have been open and you can just do takeaway. I don't know if that's going to end now, because you're going to be able to go in the pub, so you're not going to be allowed to take takeaway and stand around outside the pub. I don't know I'm going to do my research today before I decide if I actually am going to go to the pub tomorrow. But and to be honest, let's face it, I'm hardly going to support the economy with my 2.5 pints. And it'll be, after all, I'll fall over after 2 pints. But but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and it depends on how much outdoor space pubs have got, that side of thing. And I do wonder whether there's a case of there will almost be as many journalists as there will be genuine pub goers. There's always that kind of sense that sometimes when an event happens, there's almost as many people reporting on it. I'm sure it's not really like that, and but it's but what will people do? There'll be a hardcore of people, I guess, like anything, who are absolutely prepared, absolutely ready for this to be their big night out. This is the biggest. This is like New Year for some people, I reckon. but
Yeah,
not
I
that
mean,
many.
who knows? And let's see, by the time this goes out, we'll have found out. So perhaps we should not do speculation. Might look very
Yeah,
stupid by Monday.
yeah,
But
well,
even if you're going out for a big mad night out on Saturday, when you get there and find that you've got to sit at a table and it's not what you thought it was, what it was like before, I wonder if that will put the brakes on your
yeah,
big mad night out. Or, I mean, as we've mentioned, will it actually affect people's mental health? And that they're going out for their big night out and they end
yeah,
up disappointed because it's not. It's sort of like it used to be,
yeah,
but it's not. And it'll actually be a reminder of what we've lost over these
could
last
be.
3 months. What we've lost now and going forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, it's speculative. This is foolish,
Yes.
basically.
Well,
Because
let's be honest. Everything about when I'm 44 and when I'm 64 is speculation. That's the whole point, isn't it? Hopefully, no.
yeah, but this one will this one will actually be proved right
Date
or wrong.
date really quickly.
But I tell you, just one other thing I would throw into the one when I'm 44 mix, which I think will be something for the sort of near future that I think will be interesting. As somebody who's come back from furlough this week, is I'm surprised what the experience has been like. I mean, I'm only back on flexible furlough,
Yeah.
but that having had 3 months out, getting used to being back at work and doing work and finding the hours to do it, and in my case, because I work flexibly anyway, but that experience of returning from furlough, and I've seen a few press releases saying, well, how are you going to bring your workers back from furlough, and it's going to be yeah, whatever, you just turn up and go back to work, right? But it's not like that. It is a bit odd,
Yeah.
and I think the interesting thing for men, of course, is that it's not an experience we're used to. Many women have been out of the workplace for 9 months and then been returners when they've had children, whereas men generally only do 2 weeks. And that's the same as being on
Yeah.
holiday, essentially. Not the experience is the
Yeah.
same as being on holiday,
No,
but the length
no.
of time is the same as being on holiday. So I think there'll be some
Yeah.
interesting research and experience of this coming back from furlough that will be hopefully
Yeah.
sort of, there'll be perhaps a better understanding amongst men of what it's like for women coming back from maternity leave. Perhaps that
Yeah.
will be in the next 18
No,
months.
no, I think that's a really, really good point because we're talking about, for you, we're talking about maybe 3 months, is it something around that stage? So it's
3 months.
you know, it's it's if most men don't get 3 months for, or don't take 3 months for paternity leave, even
Mm.
if they're necessarily entitled to. So yeah, I hadn't really thought about it in that way. I think that's a really interesting point. It is a return to work in the same way
Yeah,
you could be, medium term sickness. There's a whole kind of piece there, isn't there? Yeah, I hadn't
yeah.
thought about
I
that.
think
That's really interesting. I mean, I think that's really interesting. And that transition. I mean, what have you found in terms of coming back? What has surprised you about sort of the almost the emotional response to coming back? Is there anything that surprised you about it?
I think it's like it's the thinking about the last 3 months. You don't exactly switch off from work, but I haven't been thinking about work. I've been thinking about all the usual dad stuff and all the rest of it, which I've sort of taken an interest in, but I haven't thinking about how it applies to my job.
Yeah,
And now I am having to think about that. And it's like, there's a sort of a certain way of thinking, which I've kind of, I'm
yeah,
lost, but I'm having to, I didn't even realize there was a way of thinking until
yeah.
hang on, I need to actually think like this, and how do I think
How
more
do you write?
strategically as well? I mean,
Yeah,
that's part of it, is drawing up a plan, going, right, what is our role now? How do we make that case?
yeah,
And I need to come up with a strategy. Whereas for the last 3 months, the strategy has been, how do we get through the day?
yeah,
How do we make the day
yeah,
different to the day before and different to the next day? And
yeah.
it's been a much smaller sort
Mm,
of time scale and general scale, to be honest. And now you
yeah.
have to start thinking more strategically and more long term, and that's different. So
Mm,
that's been I don't know if there's been an emotion, but it's been a sort of surprise that I think, and I think that's something that I said perhaps a lot of men will find, is that this is what it's like coming back from
yeah,
maternity leave. Suddenly it's quite a big change from that domestic life to that more strategic work life, and of course
yeah.
there's a big
You get
crossover between the
yeah.
two.
And
Um,
you get used to it. You get used to the rhythm of the day. I mean, that's one of the things that I know I talked about at the start about how this week some of the rhythm of the day has been all over the place. I just felt like I just never getting separation. But you could get used to that, and suddenly you're back into it. There's a quote I came across quite recently, which I know I'm no big boxing fan, and I'm not a boxing fan at all, actually, to be honest. Um, but from the Rocky spin-off film called Creed. And in that
Mm.
film, then apparently Rocky is coaching
Mm.
coaching the young boy in
Agreed.
boxing, and Creed, yep, Apollo Creed's son, I think it is, from Apollo Creed is early Rockies 2 and 3, I think, or
Yeah.
3 and 4. Anyway, he says to Creed, he said it's about one step, one punch, or one step at a time, one punch at a time, one round at
Mm.
a time. And it really kind of resonated in terms of this sort of survival instinct. Actually,
Yeah.
we're just doing one step at a time. And now we're looking around going, actually, the bell's gone. It's the end of the round.
Mm.
Right? Okay, well, what next? That kind of strategic view. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's. I mean,
Mm.
for me personally, I've kind of, I lost a piece of work which I thought was going to run through the summer, which would have been great. And so it's been kind of tricky from that point of view. But I've been, I guess, thinking strategically over the summer anyway, in terms of making connections, in terms of associate
Mm.
work, and people I might want to work with, you know, doing this podcast. It's given great structure, doing other bits of webinars and Zoom casts, and it's been great because actually a lot of things have gone online. And with my general work pattern, which is drop the kids off at school, pick the kids up from school at 3 o'clock, a lot of the face-to-face stuff, that a quick coffee in London is like, well, I don't really do quick coffees in London. I set up Zoom calls with people, and that's
Mm.
become de rigueur. And so it's been relatively easy to sort of factor that into the strategic piece. But yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
really, really interesting, that sort of change of perspective, I guess.
Well, look, here you go. Here's the smooth. Let's go into the tips, and that leads me on to, I've got a couple of tips, both connected to what you've just said and what I've just said. So the one connected to what I've just said is, if you are still on furlough, read books and laze around and do nothing. I mean, after 3 months going back, I'm like, why was I don't know, I seem to be doing stuff all the time for the 3 months. Why didn't you just sit around and take the opportunity to actually read some books? So if you are still on furlough, read books, ease up. And that would be my tip.
Yeah.
Just connected to what you said about making connections there, I mean, that would be my other tip is, like I said, I mean, I'm thinking about it, so Ian, we're all thinking about what the case is, and how we team up and how we take it forward in terms of the dad's agenda, if you want to call it that. Is get in touch, basically, is my tip. Get in touch with one of us either through Ian's website, or I'm on social. We're all both on social media. You'll find us. My website's james-miller.com. He's Inspiring Dad. Get in touch, and very much would like to have a conversation with everyone and anyone who wants to get in touch about their experience and how that feeds into making the case going forward. Because obviously we both very much believe in making that case. Yeah. What's your tip this week, Ian?
So my tip is about dividing the day up, I think, as much as anything. I really struggled with things blurring. Yeah, I don't know, just saying, right, this is the time for homeschool, and just do homeschool at this time. This is the time to do, something a little bit different. This is time we're going to go out in the garden. We're going to go and do something. I've caught myself sort of drifting from one thing to another. An evening, kids are in bed at sort of roughly 9 o'clock, and then I'll go back to the laptop and I'll do 45 minutes. It's nothing here nor there. I'm almost better off doing 9 till 11 at night and just blitzing it, and then the next night completely not touching anything work related, and trying to just separate stuff out, because I found that sort of blurred lines was a really, really odd experience midweek, sort of this week.
Yeah.
So that would be
mine.
For,
especially good tip for me going into next week, because I'm going to have to start working out what my actual work hours are. So I shall take that tip very much to heart and work out what are for doing work, and what the hours are for doing homeschool and all the rest of it.
It's good. But
okay. We've got a guest next week, haven't we? I can't remember who it is, but I know we've got somebody.
Yeah, so next week we've got Freddie Bennett joining us. So Freddie is a Guinness World Record holder. Don't tell
him what it is. Don't tell him what it is. Don't tell him what it is. What the record is.
Yeah,
it's a good one. It's a good one.
It's a great one. So we'll talk about Freddie's world record next week. His wife is an NHS doctor, frontline A&E doctor, I think, from my memory. But we'll talk more about that. So he'll have some interesting perspectives on that side of things in particular. So yeah, we've got a guest next week. Obviously, you go to I don't know why I say WW. It's like 1990s. I remember this the other day. I was thinking the other day, why do I say WW? if you go to inspiringdads.co.uk, and then there's a big red button in the top right-hand corner, which is Lockdown Dads Show, and then you can listen to the shows, you can watch the shows, you can subscribe. We're carrying on doing this certainly for the medium term. I think certainly there are elements of lockdown. I think we're certainly looking at running for a good 4 or 5, 6, maybe up until September initially. Shows, we've got guests lined up, so we're going to keep going, but you can listen to our previous guests and watch the recordings of those shows through the website. And yeah, do get in touch with us. We love connecting with people on LinkedIn. We love connecting with people on Twitter. We love sharing ideas. It's a true story. We haven't really talked about it before, but the reason why the reason our relationship sort of started was that I discovered James's book, Dads Don't Babysit, and I discovered it via a podcast. As it happens, it was the guys on the Daily Mirror?
Yeah, the
First Time Dad. So I happened to stumble across First Time Dads, heard James talking about his book, went and bought the book, did a review on Amazon. I know. Then I went on Twitter and found you, and I tagged you and said, I think this book's great. And then we started coming up to, and you said, do you want to have a chat about it, about what the content is? I was like, yeah, I'd love to.
That's how that book came about, actually, was somebody getting in touch about my previous book. He said, I like what you did, let's talk. Yeah. I was like, okay, write a book, let's write Dad Don't Babysit. Yeah, this is how these connections are good, basically.
So
we need to talk about your address as well, actually, Ian, but we should probably talk about that off air. Because you've got that on your website, I've noticed. You've got your address on your website. So obviously, being a bit snoopy, I looked it up. I think you literally live around the corner from where I used to live when I was born.
Really? Well, like really close.
Cool.
Well, which road was that? I'm just thinking about change. Someone said that bit of their website didn't work. It's like a squeeze page, but
don't want to give away your address on air. So
it's fine. It's on the website.
Well, that's true. Yeah. All right.
I haven't got the number, the street number. To which can I even see where you lived? Maybe.
Anyway, let's discuss that.
Okay.
Let's not give away our address. Anyway,
okay, so
go on our go on the YouTube and on the wherever you get your podcast, and rate and review us. Comment under the video. That'll work for getting in touch. As I say, go to our website, social media. You'll find us. Please get in touch, and please come back next week for another Lockdown Dads, and you can find out what the world record is. It's worth coming back just for that. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.